This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you so much for having me this morning. We have a lot of information, limited time, so we'll try to, like Parsha Snach, like the table, we'll try to squeeze a lot into a short amount of time. I want to present to you what I consider a revolutionary understanding of the Akeida, and I hope after you're finished you say, you know what? Obviously, that's obviously the pshat, that's what the psukim are saying. If anyone comes to me and says, you know, of course, it's black and white, that will bring me the greatest nachas. Because what I would like to think what we're saying are dvarim pshutim and at the same time quite novel. Vayhi achar hadvarim ha'elev olaykim nisas Avraham. The Rebbeinu Shalom tested Avraham. And the obvious question is, and I was always bothered, and I searched in the Rishonim, and the Rishonim asked the question as well, what do you mean Velikim Nisas Avraham? If anything, it should be Velikim Nisas Yitzchak. Avraham gets to go home afterwards, eat a Shabbos Suda, have some cholent, and move on with the rest of his life. Yitzchak's the one who's ending up Boilam Ha'emes. What do you mean? Yitzchak's the one who's giving up his life. Why Velikim Nisas Avraham? Velikim Nisas Yitzchak. Or at the very least, Velikim Nisas Avraham the Yes Yitzchak. Ask Toisvis in the name of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Vayeira kachna es bincha es yechidcha asher ahavta es Yitzchak. Rashi says Hashem comes to Avram. He says kachna es bincha. Avram says I have two children. So Hashem says yechidcha, you're only one. So Avram says they're both the only one to their mother. Asher ahavta, that you love. Avram says I love both of them. Es Yitzchak. So Rashi asks, so just hit the nail on the head. Yeah. Say it simzach. Say v'kachna es Yitzchak. No. He didn't want to say it suddenly because he didn't want Abraham to be startled and maybe the decision would not have been a well thought out decision. We may have thought it was just a reactionary decision. So Hashem brought it out slowly. Perhaps though there's another meaning over here. We know there's not one extra letter in the Torah. Why the arichos as bincha as yechidcha asher ahavta? Vayashkim Avraham baboiker vayachavosh es chamoiroi vayikach es shnei ne'arav itoi. He took his two lads. Says Rashi, who are his two lads? Says Rashi, Yishmael and Eliezer. Mavra boisai, Yishmael and Eliezer. Eliezer, I get, he's Damascus Eliezer. He's the faithful attendant of Avram Avinu. But Yishmael, what in the world is Yishmael doing there? You forgot what it says before? Sarah Yimenu says to Avram, Goresh ben ha'mazois. Get at it. Get rid of this kid. Get rid of this oisvarf. Don't send him to an off-the-derech yeshiva. Get him out of the house. Don't send him to a program. Don't get him an extra tutor. Don't deal with him. Don't slide with him. Don't be patient with him. No. None of this 2017 business. Out of the house. Get rid of him. And he got rid of him. And it hurt Abraham. And Hashem said, don't sweat it. Whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her. Vayeshev b'midbar paran. Yishmael moved out of the house. Frek toisvis. So what in the world is Yishmael doing by the Akeida? I mean, I'm not exactly sure how old Yishmael was at the time that they threw him out. Yitzchak was at least 2 years old, because we know Vayigdal Vayigamal. Rashi says Chavdaled Chadashim. So if Yitzchak was 2, Yishmael was 15. And by the Akeida, Yitzchak was 37, right? So presumably, Yishmael's been out of the house 35 years. How many times has he come back? We don't know of any. So what's he doing by the Akeida? He's already kicked out of the house. Says Toisus, it must be that it was visiting day. It must be, for some odd reason, Hashgacha had it that the night that the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Avraham, Kachna es bincha es yichidcha asher ahavta es Yitzchak, Yishmael had just come back to the house, and that's why Avraham Avinu thought, what are the chances that Dafka in the last 35 years, Yishmael's here in my house only one time, that the Rebbeinu Shalom should tell me, Kachna es bincha es yichidcha asher ahavta, must be Yishmael. If it was Yitzchak, Rebbeinu Shalom had 35 years to give me the message. Must be Yishmael. I would like to think it was not coincidental that Yishmael happened to be in the house that night. You guys stay back here with the donkey. Says Gemara Kedusha Naf Samaches. We learn from here that a kid who comes from a shivcha has a halachic status of a chamar. Am hadoim el chamar. Shvu lachem poyim hachamar. Am hadoim el chamar. Ben Yisrael haba min hashivcha einoi meyuchas acharav. Just think for a moment. This is a drasha, a halachic drasha. The Rebbeinu Shem could have chosen any location in the Torah to teach me this halacha, that a kid who comes from a shivcha is not miyuchas acharei aviv. Why dafka at the Akeida is this drasha being taught to Klal Yisrael for lenetzach netzachim through the mouth of Abraham Avinu? Kivorech avorechecha. The malakh says, "Oh, you passed the test. Rebbeinu Shem's going to bench you. V'harba arba zaracha kechoichvei hashamayim. He's going to increase your children like the stars. V'yirash zaracha es shar oivav, and your children will inherit the gate of their oyev, their enemy." So, okay, their enemy. We all know we all have enemies. The Jewish people have no dearth of enemies. But if you look at the pasuk, I would like to think the word oyevecha, oyev, is a very specific word. The word oyev has a very specific connotation. We know in Lashon HaKadosh there's an oyev and there's a soine, and they mean different things. There is a pasuk in Chumash that uses both words. In Nitzavim it says, "V'nasan Hashem Elokecha, eis kol ha'alois ha'ela alo yevecha v'al soinecha asher dafucha." Hashem will place the curses on your oivim and on your soinim. Says Rabbeinu B'chaye, throughout history, the Jewish people have had two primary enemies, Esav and Yishmael, and they're always, each one is vying for the position of who's worse to us, who's more vicious to us. Says Rabbeinu B'chaye, who would you categorize as Oyev and who would you categorize as Soine? Says Rabbeinu B'chaye, an Oyev is worse than a Soine. The word Oyev comes from the root Oyev Avoy, that when you see him, you shout out, Oyev Avoy. A soine could deal with you sometimes berachmanos. The oyev, his hatred is preserved. Lenetzach netzachim. Says Rabbeinu B'chaye, Yishmael is the oyev and Esav is the soine. Now, by the way, not all Rishonim agree with that, but that is the opinion of Rabbeinu B'chaye, and it would seem that Esav is usually the quintessential soine. Halacha biyadua, Esav, soine, Yaakov, and Yishmael is then the Oyev. So to me, this hit me like a ton of bricks. That at the end of the Akeida, the Rebbeinu Shalom, through the malakh, is telling Abraham, from now on, V'yirash zaracha es shar oivav. You will now overpower and prevail against Yishmael. Somehow the Akeida is how we overcome Yishmael. So let's begin. Achar hadvarim ha'ela. Achar hadvarim ha'ela. So obviously the Torah is saying that this episode of the Akeida is connected to something previously spoken about. Meaning because of, after A has happened, now we're up to B. So Rashi wants to know, after what did the Akeida happen? What is the introduction to the Akeida? Says Rashi, the Akeida follows a story and a conversation between Yishmael and Yitzchak. Yishmael says to Yitzchak, look, we know what's going on over here. There's a competition here. We're both vying to be the spiritual heir of Abraham Avinu. Who will be the next Av? Who will be the continuity of the patriarchs? Yishmael says, you know what it's all about. It's all about Mesiras Nefesh. It's all about sacrifice for the ideals of the Avos. Get out of here. You're going to compete with me? You had a Milah at 8 days old. You didn't know what was going on. You were all comfortable. You were just born. I had Milah at 13 years old. It's not even a contest. It's not even a choice. Obviously, I'm the heir to Abraham. Whereupon Yitzchak makes the following declaration. If God would tell me to slaughter myself, my whole body, you're making me afraid with one Ever. If God would tell me to slaughter myself, I wouldn't hesitate. I'm the heir of Abraham Avinu. So I think then it becomes obvious what the pshat is in V'halekim Nisas Abraham. You can't say V'halekim Nisas Yitzchak. Yitzchak just took a neder that if God would tell him to slaughter himself, I'll do it. So he made it. So it's not a nisayon. He committed himself. He promised to do it. He said he's going to do it. So Yitzchak's test is, he brought it on. Yitzchak says, bring it on. You say bring it on, God's going to bring it on. It's a test for Avram. Made no promises. Avram never said to Hashem, you know what? If you would tell me the story, Avram never said that. Avram would never say that. So Yitzchak, you're not going to call it Nisayan. Yes, it was a difficult thing, but Yitzchak said he would do it. So it's not V'halekim Nisas Yitzchak. It's Yitzchak Nisas Yitzchak. V'tzalekim nisas Avraham. Let's just paint a certain picture and then we'll try to wrap it up. If this is the case, that this was a conversation between Yishmael and Yitzchak, then it's not exact. Why is it not exact? Because Yishmael had his milah. Yishmael says to Yitzchak, my milah and your milah, it's no context. Then immediately after, the Torah should say, Achar hadvar ma'ela v'alekim nisa es Avraham. But it interrupts the regular flow of this episode, and it injects a different maisa. What maisa does it inject? Avimelech and Fichot Sar Tzavai come to Abraham and they say, like Yemima, God's with you, and Hashem loves you, and we want to be on good terms with you, so let's make a peace treaty. And we have this peace treaty between Avimelech and Abraham. By the way, nothing to do with anything. If you look on the Rashbam says one of the most frightening things you'll ever see. The Rashbam says, oh, Abraham, you're giving Gentiles a chelek of Eretz Yisrael? I didn't give you Eretz Yisrael to make peace treaties. Oh, you want to make a peace treaty? Go kill your son. That's, the Rashbam says, the connection between the Akeida and the deal of Avimelech and Fichot Sar Tzavai. That's what the Rashbam says. You're going to make a peace treaty in Gaza? Go take your son that you hoped for your whole life and shecht him. I gave you Eretz Yisrael for you, not to give away. That's what the Rashbam says. Again, I'm not here to say, I'm just reporting the words of the Rishonim. But nothing to do with anything. You should know that, take a look. But that's not what Rashi says. Rashi says that the Akeida follows the conversation of Ishmael and Yitzchak. No, it doesn't. There's an episode of Avimelech, Melech Plishtim. So this is a question of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zechat L'Vracha. And Rabbi Yaakov says a very interesting thing. And this gives us a better understanding of what is about to unfold. Rabbi Yaakov says, why does Yishmael have zchus in Eretz Yisrael? What right do they have to Eretz Yisrael? It's our land. First Rashi in Chumash, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, that Hashem began the Torah with Bereshis to realize that Eretz Yisrael belongs to Klal Yisrael. What's Yishmael doing there? There is one zechus that they have that gives them merit in Eretz Yisrael. The Zohar says that is the merit of Milah, the zechus of Milah. And now Yishmael and Yitzchak are vying for control of the land. So you might get really scared and think to yourself, well, Milah, then they're going to overpower us because we do Milah at 8 days, they do Milah at 13. So the first hakdama to the Akeida, says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, is there's a man by the name of Avimelech. Avimelech is the king of the Plishtim. What word in Tanakh is used to describe the Plishtim? Whenever we talk about Plishtim, we always use the following word. Arelim, 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 Arelim. The definition of Arelim are Plishtim. Shmuel, Shoftim, whenever we invoke Plishtim, Arelim. You know what the point is, says Rabbi Yaakov? You're going to read the Zohar and you say, oh, Yishmael has a chus hamilah. How are we going to ever get them out of Eretz Yisrael? The first thing the Torah says is don't sweat it. Milah is not really that important to Eretz Yisrael. Vayeira, look at these Arelim. They're in Eretz Yisrael also. Must be that Milah is not such a big chus, and it's not. Don't get too excited about the Divrei HaZohar, because even the Arelim are in Eretz Yisrael. That's the Hakdama to the Akeida. That's what Rabbi Yaakov says. But now we come to the Akeida, and I believe the Akeida is vying over control of Eretz Yisrael and the Har HaBayis. Because we see, Yishmael tells Yitzchak, I'm the heir. I had Milah at 13 years old. I am the spiritual heir of Abraham Avinu. So Yitzchak says to Rebban Shem, bring it on. I would be moiser nefesh, my entire body. V'olekim nisas Abraham. But Yitzchak nisas Yitzchak. And here's the deal. Yes, Abraham threw Yishmael out of the house. But why did he throw him out of the house? Because he really believed with conviction that Yishmael is not his spiritual heir? No. The pasuk says, Vayeira Avram oid. Avram was very upset. He had to throw out his son. And Hashem said, Al Yeira beinecha on Yishmael. Why? Koil asher tomer l'chasara shema koila. Just listen to your wife. So Avram says, well, what can I do? For Shalom Bayis, Rebban Shalom told me to throw him out of the house. But does that mean that Avram believes with full heart that Yishmael is not his heir? Or, there are a lot of things we do because we just listen to our wife. It doesn't mean we believe with full conviction. Somebody told me he's only here at the shiur because his wife told him to come. Doesn't mean I want to be. There's things we do because Hashem says that's not good enough. That's not what I'm getting at. I don't want you to be goresh. I don't want you throwing Yishmael out of the house only because Sarah told you to. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring Yishmael back to the house one night. Hashgacha had it that Yishmael is going to come back to the house one night. So Avram for a minute thinking, and now the Rebbeinu Shem tells me, Kachna es bincha sichidcha asher ahavta. Maybe it's Yishmael. So Hashem says, let's get something straight. Kachna es bincha, Avram says, I have two. Kachna es yichidcha, I have two. Yitzchak, you don't have two. You only have one kid who's bincha, yichidcha, asher ahavta. I don't want to hear you say asher ahavta on Yishmael. Don't you dare say that. I'm going to let you know that bincha, yichidcha, asher ahavta is who? Is Yitzchak. And it's not so easy for Abraham. The Torah says it was difficult in his eyes. Why can't Yishmael also have connection to Eretz Yisrael, to the Harabayas? So you know what the Rebbeinu Shalom does? Vayeira hamakoim merachaik. They see the makoim from far, says the Medrash. What's the makoim? The Shechina. Abraham turns to Yitzchak. No, give a kick. You see? So Yitzchak says, yeah, I see. Avad, I see. It's the Shaila. He turns to Yishmael. You see? He says, see what? See what? What do you mean, see what? It's the Shechina. What? I don't see anything. Says Avraham Avinu im Kain. There's something you have in common with the Chamar. The Chamar doesn't see the Shechina, and you don't see the Shechina. Shavu lachem poyim hachamar. You know what your connection to Harabayas is? The connection of a Chamar. Yeah, sometimes there'll be a Chamar on the Harabayas. That's your connection to Harabayas. In other words, what the Rebbeinu Shalom is trying to accomplish through the Akeida, avad that's an Nisayon for Abraham. But that's the Elikim Nisas Abraham angle. But there's another angle taking place. What about the V'yitzchak Nisas Yitzchak angle? That Yitzchak is using the Akeida as a way to overcome Yishmael. So the Rebbeinu Shalom is orchestrating. He says, Abraham, I want you to know, Bincha, Yichidcha, Asher Ahavta is Yitzchak, and Yishmael Goresh es ben ha'ama hazois. And you know what I want you to end up saying about Yishmael? Shavu lachem poyim achamor. Yishmael has no shayches to the Harabayas. Forget the Milah. You brought Arelim into Eretz Yisrael. The Milah is not going to do anything for him. So now we understand at the end of the Akeida, the malakh comes and the malakh says, Kivarech avarechacha. V'harbe arbe zaracha k'choich ve'hashamayim v'chachoel asher v'yirash zaracha es shar oivav. For all eternity, when Yishmael is going to say, we want Eretz Yisrael, we want Harabayas, we tell them, get lost. That kid is done already. you just have Milah. We're Moiser Nefesh b'chol levavchem v'chol nafshechem. We gave up everything for the Rebbeinu Shalom. You're out of Eretz Yisrael. You're out of the Harabayas. I think it's Parsha. That's what the Akeida is. So Rashi says. That's what Tosfos says. It's not a coincidence Yishmael had to be there that night. The Rebbeinu Shalom set it up. If somebody offers you vanilla ice cream and you choose vanilla, that means you hold vanilla is better? No. They didn't give you chocolate. You have to have chocolate and vanilla in front of you, and you choose vanilla. If Yishmael would not have been in the house that night, then we can't overcome Yishmael. Avram was not selecting Yitzchak. Rebbeinu Shalom orchestrated that Yishmael should be there, and that Hashem should say, Bincha yichidcha asher ahavta. Ain't that kid? It's Yitzchak. You know what this kid is? Am hadoim el chamar. Let's just bring out one more inyan. Parshas Lech Lecha. So Avram and Sarah married many years. They don't have any children. So Sarah says, I have a great idea. Why don't you take Hagar? Maybe you'll have a kid with Hagar. And Mibia Rishayna Hagar was Nesabra, and the pasuk says, Vayeira ki harasa vatekal gevirta be'eineha. She looked down on Sarah. She disparaged Sarah. Rashi says, all of a sudden Hagar turns to Sarah, and Hagar says, Sarah ain Sarah kigluyeha. You're a faker, you're a hypocrite. You make believe you're a tzaddikas. Really now. You're living with the guy for who knows how long. You can't have a kid. I lived with him, Mibia Rishayna, I'm ready to saber. I'm the real tzaddikas over here. So Sarah was very hurt. Sarah says to Avram, Chamasi alecha, why don't you stick up for me? So Avram has no choice. He says, okay, just take her, and Asila hatoiv ve'inayach, v'te'aneha Sarai. Sarai insulted Hagar. She took advantage of Hagar. She hurt Hagar. And right after that, the malakh comes to Hagar and he says, don't worry, you can have a kid. For hu yiyeh pera adam. Says the Heilige Ramban, it's not a coincidence that the Besura to Hagar, that she's going to have a Yishmael, comes immediately after Vate'aneha Sarai. Says the Ramban, one of the most frightening things you'll ever hear. We don't know how the Ramban knows this, we don't know what the Makar is, but the Ramban says, do you know why we suffer from Ishmael ad hayoim? Because she hurt her feelings. She insulted Hagar. Don't hurt anyone's feelings, even a guy. You hurt someone's feelings and they feel insulted, they feel afflicted, and they produce a child. And Avram didn't defend Hagar, Avram didn't stand up for her. All the tsaras of Klal Yisrael ad hayoim from Yishmael because Vataneha Sarai. But not everybody agrees with the Ramban. One of the Balei Atosis, the Riva, says that's not correct. Sarah did the right thing. What do you mean? But it's Nakama. Well, because Hagar insulted her, she could insult her back? Yeah, you're allowed to do that. That's a shita of the smag. The shita of the smag is that if somebody hurts you monetarily, you can't take revenge. But if someone hurts your feelings, you're allowed to take revenge. It's not possible for a human being to overcome such a temptation, such a nisayon. Now, whether we paskin like the smag, ask your local Orthodox rabbi. Luckily, I'm not local. But there's a shita of the smag. The Chafetz Chaim brings it down in the Sefer Chafetz Chaim. Comes the Abar Benel. The Abar Benel says Sarai was correct. Sarah did the right thing. Sarah sees that her maidservant is a balas gaiva, is arrogant, is obnoxious, so she has to put her in her place. We don't agree with the Ramban that Sarah acted incorrectly. She did the right thing. There's a famous story that's brought in the writings of the Arizal, and I was very surprised that it was discovered in the writings of the Rishonim as well. We know the Chida quotes a lot of Rishonim that we did not discover their manuscripts until this century. One of them was the writings of Rabbi Yaakov Sakili, the Talmud of the Rashba. And Rabbi Yaakov Sakili records a story that maybe many of us are aware of. The Arizal certainly writes about this. That there's a man by the name of Yishai, and Yishai, he came from Moav. And he relied on the psak of Boaz, that Boaz was allowed to marry Rus, and therefore Yishai felt that his children were the continuity of Malchus Yehuda. But then by the end of his life, he started getting really nervous and said, you know what, maybe Doeg was right, maybe Boaz was not allowed to marry Rus, and therefore he had an einfal. He said, you know what, he tells his wife, he's married, 50, 60, 70 years, it's been really wonderful, it's been nice knowing you, adios amigo, have a nice day. And he goes to his shifcha, and he says, I'm going to live with you. The kid's going to be an Eved. We're going to free the Eved, and the children will be Tahar. This is written in the Arizal, and it's brought in the Rishonim. However, this mistress, this shivcha of Yishai, was very loyal to the woman of the house, and she told her, this is what your husband plans to do. I don't feel right about it. She gave over her clothing to Eishas Yishai. Eishas Yishai dressed up like the shivcha, Eishes Yishai went into Yishai. That night, David HaMelech was conceived. That night, David was conceived. The Arizal writes it. We're on the Rishonim. David, a few months later, Yishai sees his wife is pregnant. The children say the mama was Mazana. Yishai said, it's not good. Don't tell anyone, it's not good for Shidduchim. Yishai said, don't tell anyone. David was born, they paskined, he's a mamzer. Really? It's a pasuk in Tehillim. Muzar ha'yisi le'echai. When he was born, they threw him to the dogs. I don't even know at what point in time did they realize what happened. I don't know. I guess when they appointed David Melech Yisrael, by then they must have straightened it out. Somebody told me that he thinks he saw somewhere that the reason why when Shmuel came to Yishai and Yishai only showed him the 7 kids, they didn't show him David because he didn't think David was his kid. I don't know if there's a makar for that. Comes the Chida, and the Chida comments on this story. He says, I saw in the writings of the Ramah Mipano that you know who the Shivcha of Yishai was? She was a gilgul of Hagar. And she came back to this world to rectify the following item. She talked down to Sarah. She was not loyal to Sarah. She vatekal gevirta be'eineha. She was overbearing over Sarah. So she had to come back to this world to rectify that sin. How? By being loyal to Eishes Yishai. Ad kan divrei Haramah Mipano, brought in the Chida. You can look at it at 22. And I could not help but think the following. There's a common theme that I enjoy to speak about, and that is in the end of days, there are 2 golosim. The Medrash Shachar Tov, Rashi and Zechariah, the Arizal, they all say that the final golos is a dual golos of Edom and Yishmael. We're seeing in our own times the transition of Golos Edom. I know as a kid growing up in America, nobody ever heard of Golos Yishmael. Golos Edom, the Western world. And now we're seeing the transition. We're seeing the ascendancy of Yishmael in the world. I don't have to tell you what's going on in Europe, what's going on in England, what's going on in America, in Flatbush, in Coney Island Avenue. I was a Rav in Queens. Next door to my shul, all of a sudden, a big building comes up. And you think you're in Beirut. There are 2 golosim that we're living through. Golos Adam and Golos Yishmael. We also have 2 Mashiachs. There's something called Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. The Gemara says, why do we need 2 Mashiachs? Why do we need Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David? If you want to know where the Gemara says this, the Gemara writes this in this commentary to Safra, Ditzniusa. It's on number 23 on your sheet. Golos Edom, Golos Yishmael. What is Esav called? What is Edom called? Parim Abirim, a shar. Esav is called an ox. What is Yishmael called? Shavu lachem pa'im ha chamor. Yishmael is called a donkey. Esav is called an ox. Says the Gra, you better not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Because if you plow with an ox and a donkey together, Esav and Yishmael will come together. They will destroy the world. If Esav and Yishmael ever get along, they will destroy the world. Baruch Hashem, they don't get along. I have to tell you a story, a very brief story. My grandfather writes when he was in Auschwitz, he saw Eichmann, and Eichmann invited a special guest to Auschwitz. You know who he invited? The Mufti from Jerusalem. My grandfather said he saw Eichmann and the Mufti sitting together, arm in arm, and they would march Jews in front of them, and they would beat them in a way the Jew would never be able to reproduce. That was the entertainment for Eichmann and the Mufti. My grandfather writes, you know what that's a kiyum of? The union of Esav and Yishmael. When Esav and Yishmael come together, they will destroy the world. You know what you get when Esav and Yishmael come together? Auschwitz. That's what you get. So it's a good thing they don't get along. The shar is Esav, the chamor is Yishmael. Says the Vilna Gaon, incredibly, but we have 2 Mashiachs. We have Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. Yosef is called what? The shar. B'char shayroi hadarloi. David is called Ani v'roi cheval chamor. Mashiach ben Yosef takes us out of Golos. Edom, we know Esav is the antidote. Yosef is the antidote to Esav. Right? Yes, Yaakov. Ace. Mashiach ben Yosef will take us out of Golos Edom. Mashiach ben David will take us out of Golos Yishmael. I can't help but think, based on the Ramami Pano, the Ramami Pano says that the Hagar came back to this world in the guise of the Shivcha of Yishai to misaking the fact that Hagar spoke down to Sarah. Now she comes and is machniya to Eishas Yishai. But I can't help but think that's the only thing Hagar has to come back for. That's the only thing Hagar did wrong by talking down to Sarah. I could think of a pretty large inyan that maybe Hagar would have to come back for. How about the fact that she brought the Pera Adam into the world? What about the fact that Hagar brought Yishmael into the world? What about the fact that Hagar brought a Chamor into the world? How's she going to rectify that? So listen to how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mesavev the Sivuvim. So Hagar comes back into the world in the guise of the Shivcha of Yishai. How is she going to rectify the fact that she brought the Chamar into the world? The only way to do that is to bring the antidote to the Chamar. How is she going to bring the antidote to the Chamar into the world? She has to bring the Ani V'Roichev Chamar into the world. So Rebbeinu Shalom sets things up that to be Masakein, bringing the Paradam to the world, she now becomes the Shadchan and the Mezaveg of Yishai and his wife and is responsible for the conception of the Ani V'Roichev Chamar, the conception of David HaMalakh. One last item, and then one. The Gemara says, Soif Makos, the Tanam went to the Harabayas, and they saw a very painful, a very frightening scene. They saw Shualim Hilchubai, and they began to cry. They said, Makom Sha'amar v'Hazar HaKarev Yumas. And now Shualim Hilchubai and Rabbi Akiva was Mitzachik. What's the side of this Gemara? What was Rabbi Akiva laughing about? There's a Talmud of the Ramami Pano, Rabbi Yamin Vitali. Rabbi Yamin Vitali writes, you just have to look at the word Shualim. Shualim is Gematria Yishmael. It's also Oisios Yishmael without the Aleph. When you see Yishmael on the Harabayas, it's the biggest joke in the world. You know what their understanding of Harabayas is? You know what they perceive in the Harabayas? Shavu lachem payim achamar. Do they see anything? Do they feel anything? Is there any connection? There's no connection. The connection of Yishmael to the Harabayas is, Avraham says to Yishmael, you see Vayeira samak merachak? See what? It's a joke on the Harabayas. But you know what else it means? The Balaturim writes at the end of Chayei Sarah, beginning of Toldos. End of Chayei Sarah is Al Pnei Kolechav Nafal. Vayeira Toldos Yitzchak, says the Balaturim. Do you know when Yitzmach ben David la'asid lava? You know when it will be Vayeira Toldos Yitzchak? Yitzchak represents the coming of the Gula. Gemara says in Shabbos, then the end of days Hashem's going to want to destroy Klal Yisrael. Yitzchak will defend us. Yitzchak is 208, Pinchas is 208. Yitzchak represents the coming of the Gula. You know when it's going to be Vayeira Toldos Yitzchak? When V'al Pnei Kolechav Nafal, when Yishmael falls, first Edom will fall, Mashiach ben Yosef, then Yishmael will fall, Mashiach ben David. We should taka bi zoicha. Al Pnei Kolechav Nafal, we should see the nefila of all the sons of Yisrael. Uvifrat begolos Yishmael, we should be zoicha ve'ela toldos Yitzchak, to see the tzmicha of Mashiach ben David, Sheyavai, v'mher v'yameinu, Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.